Throughout history, freethinkers have outraged the religious with their wacky ideas about the virtues of free speech, reason, and of course, eating babies. Now, God is dying, and it's time to dispose of his remains. From the pits of hell, Satan sends two puppets of the imperialist West and the Zionist Jews against God, Islam, and tiny kittens to bring you their propaganda and conspire for a new world order. This is Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment with Ali Rizvi and Armin Navabi.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment. My name is Ali Rizvi, and this time, again, I'm solo with our guest. Armin is away somewhere doing his thing, and he's going to be back again for our sort of February roundup, wrap up the Q&A thing. So, we're going to be back together soon. But today, I'm doing a solo episode with somebody I sort of read and admired for a very long time. Razib, sorry, I mispronounced your name right off the bat.
It's okay,
Razib Khan. Yeah, Razib Khan is here. Razib Khan is the director of science at the Insitome, at Insitome, right? And that's like a 23andMe type company,
yeah,
right?
Personal genomics company.
Personal genomics. And he's a genomics consultant. He's helped in the design of ancestry inference for family tree DNA, National Geographic, and various private clients. He runs two weblogs, which are blogs, right? I mean, Gene Expression, which is a great blog, by the way. I love Gene Expression. And Brown Pundits, and you also have a podcast, the Brown Pundits podcast.
Yeah, I have a Brown Pundits podcast. I have the Insight podcast with the Institute. So if anybody wants to find out where I am, razib.com, I actually point everything to that.
Okay, perfect. And you've written for India Today. You've written for National Review. I've seen that you've also written for the New York Times. There's a bit of a story around that we'll talk about as well.
Yeah.
And so here's how I learned about you. It was many years ago when Andrew Sullivan, the blogger, he had the Daily Dish, which was really, I used to go on that thing 4 or 5 times a day. That was my lunch break. I absolutely loved it. It made me so much smarter than I am right now. And he discontinued it in 2013. So he used to link to you, once in a while, actually fairly often, actually. And every time I read it, I was like, this is fantastic. I loved everything that you wrote. I'm also from a healthcare background. I'm a pathologist, and so I always found it really interesting. So I've been kind of a fan for a little while. So it's actually really good. I see you now in the live chats whenever we're doing these Secular Jihadist podcasts, and it's crazy for me. We're actually speaking face to face. So welcome to the podcast, and thank you for doing this.
It's great to be here. I guess I won't be trolling you today.
Yeah, you'll be trolling us. Well, please continue to do that. I really enjoy it, especially when you do it to Armin. I love it.
Yeah, 90% of the time it is to Armin.
Yeah, of course it is. Why? Who else would it be? I totally get that. So first, before we get out, this is a Secular Jihadist podcast, so I know that you come from a Muslim background. You were born in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and then you moved to the U.S. When you were, I think, a kid, right? About 4 or 5 years old. Yeah,
I had just turned 5, literally 2 weeks before I moved to the United States.
Right. So are you? So were you ever religious at any time? You were raised in a Muslim religion? Were your parents religious?
I would say, I think your term that you like to use is maybe I was Muslimish. I think I vaguely had an identification, but the story that I like to tell people is I was interested in evolution from when I was very young. My father's a scientist. I come from mostly technical scientific, family.
Oh, cool. What kind of scientist is he?
He's a chemist.
A chemist. Okay.
Yeah, my grandfather was a doctor. A lot of engineer uncles. Although if you go far back, they're mostly ulems and stuff.
Yeah.
But in any case, I got a book. It's called The Origin of Humankind. I was like, oh, it's evolution, blah blah blah, the usual, right? I was 8 years old. I opened it up, and it was a creationist book. And I remember picking it up and just chucking it because I was so enraged. And I went and complained to my dad, and he was just like, chill out. And I started thinking about it because I realized, wait a second. I think this is supposed to be real, but I have never believed in this.
Yeah.
And so I realized when I was around 8 years old that like I actually never like if you had asked me when I was 6 if I believed in God, I probably would have said yes, but I was the type of person that literally never thought about it. Like it was never like very deep within me as like a way to organize. Like I'm like the anti-Armin. When I listen to Armin, I'm just like, whoa, this guy actually believed that stuff.
Yeah.
Like I never did, you know?
Yeah, so you were. It was. I think Bill Maher calls it the apatheist, like people who are apathetic towards the idea
Yeah,
of God.
and like it is there was some apathy, but also it's almost like when you to ask people what they are, they give you kind of a script that they're taught. And then if you probe them with like various psychological measures, you can see if they actually believe in this or that. If people had probed me, they would have seen that I was basically an atheist. Like I literally never thought about God unless my parents took me to Eid, at the mosque.
Yeah.
It just never was part of my life. Not part of my cognition is the way I would say it.
Right. And what's it like with your parents or your family now? Are they still sort of like quasi-religious and do you still do Eid and things like that or no?
My parents have gotten more religious as they've gotten older. So that's a little weird. It's not like super weird. Like they know I'm atheist. Of their children, none of them are Muslim. So the only religious child they have is a Buddhist priest.
Oh, so you have
So
a Buddhist priest.
I'm doing okay. I'm just and
Yeah.
he lives near my parents. So like my mom was asking one of my other brothers. So she was like, is your brother, is he a Buddha? Like, because she says Buddha,
Uh-huh.
And my other brother's like, he wears I love Buddha t-shirts in front of you. But because he didn't really want to tell them, but he was going to show them by the t-shirts he was wearing. And so anyway, like one of my brothers, maybe I shouldn't say this, but like, I haven't asked him if I can tell people this, but I mean, he does he runs liturgy at a Buddhist temple. It's his side hustle, side job. He has a day job, but it's like
it's a day job. Side hustle is a Buddha thing. Okay. Yeah. That's good. I mean, that's
so
it's very 21st century.
Yeah, I don't get much issue from my parents about my atheism because like they have a literal like pagan son.
Yeah. But I mean, what are they going to do? I mean, you are like, especially with your the stuff that you do. That I mean, you're actually just seeing from the stuff that I've read for you over. I guess it's been almost 10 years or almost like a decade.
I've been blogging since 2002.
Okay, yeah. So I probably came across you, I think 2011, 2012, something like that. So it's been almost a decade.
Yeah.
Stuff that you do, I mean, it wouldn't be surprising that somebody who goes in that direction would be an atheist.
Sure.
So how did you get into it? How did you get into genetics, genomics? Mm-hmm. What was happening around? I mean, so the interest in evolution would have to naturally kind of go in that direction anyway.
Yeah, I was interested in evolution first. Always been one of those kids that's interested in naturalism and evolution. And I come from a family that, like there are some MDs, but really most of the scientific people are more physical science and engineering. I was a little weird. I liked animals, I like stuff like that, squishy stuff, natural history, nature shows. That was one of my things. But as I went to college, I got the thing that someone like me, just looking at me as like a brown American, okay, like I major in biochemistry. Yeah. That's what you do. So I didn't really, I double majored in biology, but I always thought like, that's kind of like, can you make a career? Can you make a life out of that? That was just, I was still kind of stuck in, I think, my wife would say I'm kind of stuck a little bit in the Asian American mentality, because like, what am I going to tell my parents? Like, they don't know what evolutionary genetics is,
Mm-hmm.
So I was interested in the topic always, and it was always my favorite subject. And then, year 2000 comes, the draft of the human genome. So genomics as a field really didn't exist in the 90s.
It didn't. You're right.
Didn't.
Yeah.
It's a 21st century thing with computation, with big data. Those are kind of my competencies and my interests. I'm not a guy with like, the pipette doing that. I mean, I've done that. I'm not good at it. Okay. Like anyone who's seen me. So I like to do data analysis. I'm basically a data scientist. I like to look the data, analyze the data, make inferences from the data. And, I also have an interest in history. I am a dilettante. Like I have an interest in a lot of things. And so I've been able to use that and, make a career out of, the intersection of genetics and history and genomics and data science and insights. On an intellectual level, I am very fascinated with just the whole idea of evolution and what it means, because I don't actually remember a time when I didn't believe in it. I
Hmm.
think I started reading these books. I was so young. There's kind of a background in my just my life, just my understanding of the universe. But on the micro scale level, I also have an interest in humans and social science and history and other things. And some of my genetics, interests have also intersected with that. So it's all kind of like come together in these weird syntheses and intersections. And um, I'm a pretty outgoing person, so I do know people in like different worlds and different domains, and I like to bring those two together too, and just see how that works.
So I actually love the way that you do that. I think because you have an interest in history, you have an interest in politics, and even religion, and what you do when you write is that stuff gets weaved into a lot of the science, but you're sort of very relentlessly factual and very sort of I was going to say religiously. You're very loyal to the data. I think that the idea of everything has to, and this is one of the things that happened with me too when I was growing up and I first learned about evolution. I remember I grew up in Saudi Arabia, right? So one of the things that they told you is that if you want evidence of God, look all around you. Just look all around you, and you'll see evidence everywhere. So here I am. I'm looking all around me, right? Like the Quran says, and there's nature all around me, and the study of nature, as everybody knows, is called science. So that was, I think, that was really interesting because every time I'd read about evolution and I'd look around me, everything would fit. Right. So I grew up, I learned about antibiotic resistance. I'm like, oh, so what's happening? These bacteria are mutating and becoming resistant to the drugs that we're using to kill them. So they're actually evolving to survive. Right. They're evolving to survive. That's evolution happening right in front of us. Read about paleontology and dinosaurs and, just the fossil record, and that adds to it. And then, as you said, the genetics revolution, the genomic revolution happens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And well, it was happening for a while, but suddenly it comes across, and it comes across as one of the most, like, it's so obvious. Evolution and genomics is just obvious. It's right there. It's not even like proof is when you have to do something to prove the existence of something else. But this is they're one and the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so the more you're looking around you, there's evidence of all of this stuff, and it fits. And then when you think of, well, God said, "Let there be light," there was light, and then He created the world in 7 days before there was a sun, and there was any such thing as a day, and all that stuff doesn't fit. It just doesn't compute at all. So it was. I think when it comes to belief, I feel like it's just a natural progression to where you end up. You just end up being an atheist or an
Mm-hmm.
agnostic, deist,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. So
Yeah, and I have heard this story from many people. I have not, I did not share it just because, as I told you, I had a very like quick epiphany that I didn't actually believe in this when I was very
mm,
young. So it was an intuitive leap for me, and so I've actually over the years, I think I'm where I should be in terms of comprehension. Over the years, I actually worked back to understand how religious people actually believed what they believed.
mm,
So that was actually a process for me because I just
yeah.
couldn't comprehend it. And so that was something that I started as a teenager and, into my 20s. And I think I'm at the level of comprehension that I'm happy with in terms of time allocation and just talking to people, reading the scientific literature, understanding how people's psychology works, like normal people, which I don't think I am.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think once you actually realize why this stuff works, why fake news works, why people believe so strongly in religion, that's when you realize, oh, okay, I've been looking, and it took me decades to do this. I only realized it, I think, very recently. Um, and that's when you realize that, okay, I am different. The way that I process, I've been thinking that everybody is going to be persuaded by the same things that I find compelling and I find convincing. But that's not how. I mean, I think one of your latest blog posts on gene expression is kind of about this, right? When you talked about how people look at history,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You have people who will say that the founding fathers were white supremacists. Others
Hmm.
that'll say the founding fathers were radical progressives. Or the founding fathers were fundamental Christians, and the facts of the matter. Well, the facts of the matter don't matter. They
Hmm.
really don't.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
People will. look back and they like, it's like the ending of Life of Pi, right? You know, where it's just, what is the better story? It doesn't matter what's truthful. What is a better story that we like, that intrigues us?
Yes.
That feels better.
That's what I've seen. My attitude towards things like, I say, like historical questions is like, I like to like bite into the meat of the facts and just read as much as possible to just kind of like get that feeling of understanding and comprehension. And as I've become older, I've realized most people really don't like reading that much.
They don't.
And so they're not gonna go there with you because it's a lot of work for them. So and
even if they do, like, confirmation bias is just the name of the game, man. I mean, like, they'll read things, and it's really hard to find stuff because you write books. So people who write nonfiction books, you're reading. They're not reference books. I mean, you're reading the opinion of one person and one person's worldview. So you'll read, is it Paul Bloom who wrote The Case Against Empathy? You're going to read that and you'll be like, oh, this empathy is just bullshit. This is nothing. And then you'll read Simon Baron-Cohen, and you're going to think, okay, well, this is a completely different angle. Most people don't do that. They tend to look at things and they find things that sort of fit their worldview in a way.
Yeah.
And the question is, where does that worldview come from?
Yeah.
What it is. And it's so the way that people process information, I think, is really fascinating. And I actually share that with you a lot. I mean, you've heard on the podcast, I talk a lot about storytelling and the use of art in sort of religion, the way that demagoguery. Yeah, exactly.
Aesthetics appeal to a lot of people. And I don't have much of an aesthetic sense. I like working on the command line.
Yeah.
Like if you put a graphical user interface in front of me, I get stressed out because I'm like, oh, I gotta like use geometry and move things around instead of just like typing commands. So I have a particular type of brain, and I think it's not very aesthetically oriented. And so that's made it somewhat difficult for me, I think, to understand what really moves people, because I'm not very moved by things.
Yeah. So I'm a little bit different from you in that way. Like, I do have I play music, and
you're creative. You're creative.
Yeah, I like doing a lot of creative things, and I understand that. I understand the power of it. So I understand how powerful music can be. And when you look at one of the things I find most interesting is just music, because it's just sort of a little bit outside the rational grasp. I mean, this is a multi-billion-dollar business that everybody's obsessed with. And it's just a range of frequencies arranged in a certain way where their wavelengths, they're sort of multiples of each other. They harmonize in certain ways, and somehow we hear that, and it can make you feel happy, it can make you feel sad, it can make you feel anything. And it's just a phenomenal experience to me. And I've always been interested in figuring it out. Kids, when they learn music, they learn a sense of rhythm. Rhythm is mathematical. It improves verbal skills, because you read a chapter in a book and you retain very little of it, but that song comes on from high school. It's a rap song that's like 3 pages long, and you remember all of the words.
Yeah, you remember memories associated with it too. There's encoded somewhere in the brain that's very different than prose.
Yeah, so I do like sort of breaking it down, and it fascinates me more. But I am interested in. I feel like one of the reasons we don't learn the lessons of history sometimes is because we're very uncomfortable. We're very uncomfortable breaking down just dispassionately the mechanisms that have made, say, someone like Hitler successful. I watched this documentary, Hitler: A Career. It was based on a book called Hitler: A Career, which is a very dispassionate look at Hitler. Didn't really talk about all the horrible things he did, because we know all about that, but really broke down what he did politically, how he used to craft his speeches, what kinds of messages he used to prioritize in the way that he used to talk, how he dealt with people in his own party, in other parties. And to me, I was looking at that, I was like, there's so many parallels between that and so much of what we're seeing now with the rise of the sort of the far right in Europe and around the world, really. And because people don't know, they're very uncomfortable looking at that side of things dispassionately. They completely miss it when it happens again, and it happens again and again and again.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes with these prophets of all these religions. I mean, they were all demagogues as well. They just knew, they had an intuitive sense of what
They had talent. They had a talent. One thing that I'd say is, back in the 2000s, during the War on Terror period, I would get pushback from people, like just criticism, because I like to look at Islam in a dispassionate way, even though my own personal opinions are not very positive.
Yeah.
And people would be like, "Are you actually really a Muslim?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not a Muslim." But I mean, I don't get anything out of getting all emotionally wrapped up in something. Like if you need to understand something, you need to put that to a side. And I mean, the Greek term is like epake, like, where you just like, you take your own feelings, you put the feelings to a side and then just analyze as if you don't have feelings, right? So that's important for any given question, any given topic. Some topics it comes very easily. Like if you're a civil engineer and you're designing a bridge, you're not emotionally invested. But if you're a doctor, you could be emotionally invested in the patient. But you still need to do your professional job in analysis, and
that's the thing. It's about topics. Like if we talk about quantum physics, for instance, people are like, I think quantum physics is bullshit, and then the other person will be like, oh, okay, well, that's your opinion. All right, okay, bye. And it wouldn't really be something that would rile somebody up emotionally. But you go to somebody and you say, I believe in creationism, or I don't believe in evolution. It suddenly becomes a very emotional issue. That's something people get passionate about, which just goes to show that it's not like, facts are, they're loaded. They're loaded with all of this.
Facts lead to feelings. Facts lead to feelings.
They lead to feelings. They can, and certain facts. So let's get down to, so I want to kind of talk about some of the geek stuff with you. So you sequenced your son's,
my older son,
your oldest,
well, actually,
your oldest,
but the older one was the one in the media.
The one in the media that you sequenced his genome while he was still in utero.
Yeah, second trimester.
Yeah, before he was born.
4 months.
Right, and you did it with the chorionic Villus sampling.
Yes, we took chorionic Villus sampling, so we got the tissue, took the tissue, mixed it up with some mushroom tissue. It's been many years, so I can talk about what happened without getting my professor in trouble.
Let me just, for the audience, who chorionic Villus sampling is basically, there's a part of the placenta that you can actually take a sort of biopsy of, and then you can analyze your unborn child's genetic material using it.
Yeah, and so what we did is, so basically got them to do that, called the lab, kind of threatened them to get the tissue back. We got the tissue back with the amplified DNA, sent the amplified DNA to a sequencing facility, and he was sequenced on a lane with a mushroom. But it wasn't a big issue because like mushroom genomes are totally different than human genomes, because people are always like, oh, how do you know that you didn't get mushrooms? And I'm like, I didn't get mushroom sequence, okay. Anyway, it's like a computationally like trivial task. So so his sequences come out, I assembled them. The first thing that I did is I ran a principal component analysis to see what the ancestry of this individual was, and the individual was placed exactly between a South Asian cluster and a European cluster with some shift to East Asians. So it was where he should be.
Yeah, that's where he should be.
Yeah.
So the East Asian thing, we all have. Is that Genghis Khan?
No, that's Bengalis.
Okay, I'm just.
It's not all. It's Bengalis have they have admixture that happened about 1,500 years ago from some Burman-like group or Tibeto-Burman-like group. There's no understanding of what happened there, but something happened. I've actually I've tried to look in the literature, but like there's no historical record of what happened. Yeah. But something happened. It's a lot. It's 15% of my ancestry is East Asian.
Yeah. So I didn't know that, but the Genghis Khan thing was a little tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
Just kind of.
But the Genghis Khan is a Y chromosomal haplogroup.
Yeah, it is. So So you had that, so you had a sequence. It was in the media a lot.
Yeah. And what happened was, I thought
this was around when? When was this?
2014.
2014. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I thought it would be available already by then, and I started asking around, like asking researchers that were at the cutting edge of fetal sequencing, and they were like, "Oh yeah, it's not like consumer yet. It's not available." And I was complaining to friends, and they're just like, "Why don't you just do something about it? Like you have the skills to analyze it." And I was like, "Okay." And so over a couple of months, I figured out who to talk to, and by hook and by crook, I kind of like bullied people into giving me the samples. And then I figured out a way to, get it sequenced, which is not something most people could have done, especially then. And then once the gigabytes of data came back, I just analyzed it. Like that data is still in a folder on my computer. I have like gigabytes of his data there still. So, that's there forever. In the future, it'll be in the cloud somewhere. And so I got that, looked at the phenotypic characteristics, the traits, Y chromosome is right. It's my kid, so I mean, all the basics, like nothing super intense, but it was basically like a proof of principle, like, oh, this can be done.
Yeah.
Which is like,
you basically just admit that you basically did the whole thing because you wanted to establish paternity. Well, went through this whole ordeal. It's like, okay, well, now I know. Yeah.
Okay, so you might, maybe I shouldn't say this, but
no, you totally have to say it now.
So let's just say the physical characteristics of my son do not look very South Asian. Well, actually, none of my kids, and so people will often and when he was a little kid, he was blonde, and so people would be like, "You sure that's your kid?" And I was like, "Oh, he was sequenced before he was born." They'd be like, "Whoa." Because it was kind of like, they were making a joke, and then I was like, "Oh, I sequenced him in utero," and they're just like, "Oh, okay, that's okay, I believe you."
So what's funny is like I have a daughter. She's 3 now, and my wife and I, when my wife was pregnant, we did the whole 23andMe thing, and then we did the match, and we looked at all the traits and stuff. We totally geeked out. We got a fetal DNA test, so we found out like really that just within a matter of weeks whether it was going to be a girl or a boy, and so we had a lot of fun with it. But when we did our 23andMe and we did the matchup, I realized a lot of things that otherwise, if I hadn't known, would have really surprised me when she was born. So my wife and I both we both look very South Asian. We have like generally dark olive, dark skin, and brown eyes, dark brown eyes. And my daughter doesn't. Like she has lighter colored eyes, and when she was born, if I hadn't done that before,
you would just be like,
Yeah, I knew there was a 44% chance that she'd have like lighter colored eyes, but I would have just been, I was like, what is this? What am I doing here? So
that's the great thing about the time we live in. You can actually look at the data and explain why this is happening. Because people routinely ask me anomalies, and I'm like, well, do you have the data? And I'll look at it, and I'm like, oh, it's because of this gene. Yeah. And so, when the way genetics happens is it's a sampling process, and there's noise within it. And so things segregate out in ways that aren't just like deterministic straight line extrapolations. Like they'll go this way, they'll go that way, And so like in any given family, you see a range of outcomes in children. And sometimes, you see children that don't look like the parents on a characteristic. And that's actually part of the way genetics is designed for evolutionary purposes.
Right. Yeah. So, so you did this, and one of the conversations, one of the things that came out at that point was, and it was probably, I think this is in your Wikipedia actually. There was a quote that you had where, and I'm talking about this because recently Richard Dawkins got into trouble again after a very long time.
Sure.
Because he talked about how eugenics is, just because it's a shitty thing to do doesn't mean it doesn't work. I mean, that was the whole point that he was making. It doesn't mean we should do it, but this whole idea of denying that it's actually a thing and it doesn't work is a totally different conversation. But then, I was thinking, you mentioned chorionic villus sampling, amniocentesis, fetal DNA screening to see, if your kid has Down syndrome, if there's any chromosomal anomaly, and in that case, you would abort the child, right? I mean, so isn't eugenics? Don't we all do eugenics at a mass scale anyway? Isn't that eugenics?
I mean, that's my argument. There's technical ways you can define eugenics where trisomies, like Down syndrome, termination doesn't count, because eugenics means the change in allele frequencies over time, and the fertility of individuals with Down syndrome is very low. So there's a technical way to say, well, that's not eugenics. But I think by any normal definition.
So just sorry, I got to translate that for the audience. Yeah. So what you're saying is that with Down syndrome, like people with Down syndrome, they don't really reproduce very often. So you're in a way that so you can make the counter argument.
So you can make the counter argument that that's not eugenics. But I mean, in my opinion, colloquially, that is. And whenever people bring it up, eugenics, like academics love to talk about, well, that's eugenics. Like eugenics could happen if we do polygenic risk scores. And I'm like, you do know that, like, there's most academics I know, like they have children at an older age. They get these like prenatal, non-invasive screens. I mean, people don't talk about it, but I mean, there's second trimester terminations, second trimester abortions, right? So I mean, what are you doing here? Like, what is this? Like, Denmark is quite proud that no children with Down syndrome were born last year. How did that happen? You know, or Iceland. So I mean, they're pro-life conservative people that always bring this up, but there's kind of a blind neglect and kind of a turning away from this fact, in my opinion, by professional upper middle class liberals, because this is what they do, and what they do is not eugenics. That's what people in the future are going to do, unless they also do it in the future, and then it's not eugenics. So I have like a sociological explanation where basically they're not going to define it as eugenics if they do it.
No, but you know, the thing is, they're not going to define it as eugenics if they do it, but they're all going to do it. It's going to happen. I mean, once we have the capability, you know, I have, if you have a child, like, so for the audience, there's this disease called Huntington's chorea, right? Huntington's chorea, chorea, that's chorea. That's where the word choreography comes from. It means dance. So these people have these uncontrollable jerky movements. And it's inherited in an autosomal dominant pattern, which means that by the time you're the age of 40, even if one of your parents has it, you are going to get it. You can't get away from it. You're going to get it. Right? So you can actually look at your genes and your genome. It'll tell you if you have that. And if you have it, you know that you're going to get this disease at the age of 40. Now, when people do that, it's a devastating thing, you know, when they realize that they're going to get it around the age of 40. Why would you not? Why would you, if you could check your fetus, or you could check even before you reproduce, and if you could check to see whether there's a chance of that happening, why would you not weed it out right there and then? There's so much being done for treatments for these kinds of diseases, like kids who have predispositions to cancers, the BRCA1, BRCA2 mutations for breast cancer that, you know, in some cases will almost certainly guarantee that you're going to get breast cancer. That's what Angelina Jolie had both of her breasts removed because of this reason, because she's positive for that mutation. I mean, we're doing all these things. I mean, you could if you could screen for this for your kids, you're going to do it. They're going to do it, and all these sort of upper class, middle class liberals are going to do it. Everybody's going to do it, and that is eugenics. They're going to do it. It's not always about. The thing is, it's a loaded word because there's the idea of having a pure race. And you know,
but I mean, that's actually, like, historically though, that was like somewhat orthogonal. That was kind of a perpendicular concern. Like they were both the racialism, racial purity concern emerged at the same time, but eugenics technically is just an application of animal breeding or plant breeding, as Dawkins,
it is. Yeah.
As Dawkins implied. So eugenics, I mean, like R.A. Fisher, one of the pioneers in evolutionary genetics, like he talked about how like crossing between different lineages might actually increase fitness because of blah blah. There's technical reasons, but my only point is they emerge at the same time historically, so we associate with them, but they're actually not that hard to decouple. And there were some weird movements. A Finnish friend was telling me, you know, in the early 20th century, other Europeans would say like Finns are mongrels, and Finns created this own ideology where they were like, yes, we are, and we're superior to you because we're hybrid like superior groups of like we're Asiatic and European, and you know, so they use this like race mixing as like a supremacist ideology. So it's like religion. There's lots of little sects and ways it can go, and you know
they can, and I want to eventually, I actually do want to talk to you at some point about my paternal haplogroup. Which is it's always been an interesting story because it's relatively rare, but we'll get to that later. But I this thing about eugenics and the people who are trying to breed pure races and the whole Hitler thing, and they get caught up. If you do evolutionary biology, if you do population genetics, you do anything like that, you're at some point going to find yourself mired in some sort of controversy, or you're going to have somebody who's going to try to use their skills to advance whatever agenda they have, and often it can get you unknowingly. So I don't know what your view of this was, but there is an association that you once worked with Richard Spencer. Is that clear? Like the white supremacist?
He was my editor at Talkies Mag. Yeah.
So at Talkies, so you were so let's just start from the beginning because I don't think the audience is going to know what Talkies Mag is. So you wrote for a publication called Talkies Mag.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's still around. So it's by like this kind of like Greek. I think he's a billionaire, but he does publishing as like as like a side thing. He co-founded the American Conservative. So what happened is like 2008, I think 2008, Richard, who was a nobody then, reaches out and he's like, hey, do you want to write some like evolution related stuff? And Talkies Mag was a bit on the edgy side. I'd say like definitely paleo-conservative, which like I have some paleo-conservative sympathies anyway.
So what is that? Can you explain paleo-conservative?
Basically, during the 2000s, neoconservative became big, like, interventionism, and paleoconservatives were basically like, we're against that. We're more isolationist, right? And so an old right, kind of like, like a lot of anti-immigration restriction people were paleoconservatives, but basically like not neoconservatives, not DC mainstream people. So, so he was an editor there until I think like 2009. And then he went and started doing his own things. And honestly, I wasn't like keeping track of him because he wasn't a famous person back then. And then he started resurfacing in the middle teens, and he had evolved. Let's just say that. So I mean, this is in the record. This is in the record. So I'm not like giving away confidences, but I knew the way I actually met Richard and was connected with him was through his ex-girlfriend who is Chinese American. So he was not a white nationalist then.
He wasn't a white, So that's interesting to me. But the thing is that people do use this against you. So at that time, you obviously had no idea what this guy was going to be like, 7 years from now.
Richard's influence echoes back into history, into his own past.
Yeah.
I mean, people use it because they can.
Yeah, they can. So like that's the thing.
That's why they do it.
Any past association that you have with them, they're gonna.
Yes, they do it to
get
everything.
You on.
He worked at the American Conservative. He interacted in DC. There are pictures of him with a lot of people.
Right. And I mean, we had Graham Wood on this show.
Well, I mean, he went to high school with him. But I'm just saying, like,
with him.
But Richard was schmoozing with a lot of Cato people in 2008 at parties.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just like a normal DC person back then.
So, but the thing is, so this Taki Mag thing, is it controversial? Because it seems like, from what I know, that you did get a job at the New York Times. They wanted you to write for them, and you did actually write a couple of pieces.
Yeah,
them,
well,
right?
I was doing a trial, and I was in grad school at the time, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to write for us?" And I was like, "Sure." And my op-eds, like, I turned it around. I mean, I'm a pretty quick writer. I turned it around really quickly, and one of them, like the cat evolution one, was like the most emailed for like 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
So, I got screenshots of that, but so they were like, "Hey, do you want to write?" And I actually asked them, like, "Have you checked me out? Because I'm pretty edgy." And they're like, "Oh, it's fine. We did, And then all that broke loose, and like, this is my philosophy on it. Like,
no, so wait, but so what broke loose exactly before you go?
Just like, I'd written for Takis. I wrote a letter to VDare in the year 2000 when I was in college.
To who?
To VDare. It's like an anti-immigration, and now it's like version to white nationalism. When I was in college, I was like reading webzines. I took issue with something in a webzine called VDare. I wrote a letter to the editor. It's
that's
there
it?
on the internet. Well, I mean, that's enough.
Yeah, that's
People
enough.
People want a job at the New York Times.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like that fell into my lap. I didn't even look for it.
Right.
And so I understand why rationally people would be like pissed that I had that opportunity, that platform.
Right.
So of course they were going to do that.
So people are upset. So here's the context. So you identify as a conservative, right? And then
I mean, I am. I mean, it's
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Identify as it. That's the way to.
That's the way
That's how the kids talk nowadays.
No. But
I identify as a human.
That's what my academic friends always all say. They say you identify as your conservative.
As a conservative, yeah, I know. So
like, okay,
yeah.
I mean,
oh, come on, get woke, Razib. Seriously, like we identify. Everything is about identifying. So so you're a conservative, and you're writing for you got this appointment from the New York Times. They find out that you wrote for this Taki Mag thing. That also had like Richard Spencer as the editor, and it was like somewhat, and they had an issue
Richard
with
Spencer didn't come up back then because he wasn't actually that famous in 2015.
Oh, so this was in 2015. Okay, so then what happens is that they tell you, okay, we're not going to keep you on as a regular contributor, but you can write one-off op-ed pieces later on.
And I didn't really follow up too much. I mean, I was in touch. I'm still friendly with some of those editors. I mean, it's just like we didn't understand the world that people were in then. They were thinking about, I mean, I think I can say this now because the people are gone that were editors then. They were thinking about like, well, maybe we'll just like kind of ignore this. But I don't think that they would ever ignore this today. I mean, multiple people have also gotten hired and fired now too. This is just a thing that happens. And so in media, it's very, very hard to get these platforms, to get these jobs. And so only the in-group can get the job. So people always ask me, how did Sarah Zhang like keep her job despite saying racist things about white people? One, they're white people. You can say whatever you want about white people. But like, let's just like, take it as a given that she did say racist, like harsh things. Well,
of course
she went to Harvard. Yeah. She went to Harvard. She knows the right people. She lives in New York City. She's part of that tribe. Like, so Ezra Klein will write articles about, this is just how we talk on the internet. Mm-hmm. Because Ezra Klein and Sarah Zhang are of the same tribe. I'm sure they know each other personally. I mean, they might not be close, but I'm sure they're 1 degree separated at max, right? So like, this is how the media world works. It's not a high-paying job, but it's influential. You get paid in influence. Like, you can destroy people as a reporter, despite the fact that you can barely make your rent in New York City, right? It's a weird world, and I'm not like super into it. I still do the blog, and I do other things, and I write periodically. Because like, who else is going to do it? Like, I'm at an age where I have a family and I have a job and I have other things going on, but who else is going to do this right now? I don't know. There's no other, I mean, like, tell me who the other Razib Khan is, and I'll just like fade out like I thought I would, because I just thought it was something I would do temporarily.
No, but that's the thing. You're hard to, there aren't a lot of people who are doing what you're doing, right?
I mean, part of it is just like, most people are like, I'm not going to say anything vulgar, but most people like lack courage. So they're not going to like say things. I will just say it. Like, what are you going to do to me? Fire me from the New York Times? I mean, like this. But people want to keep their signatures. They want to keep their perches, and so they won't say certain things. Some of the people, like I was telling my wife, like some of the people that sign up for my newsletter, you would be surprised who's signing up. But
interesting. No, yeah. But so just this question: that do you often get? Because of the kind of work you do and the kind of things that you talk about, you speak about the facts, right? Do you get a lot of the Richard Spencer type people, like, who want to give themselves legitimacy? Because there's a couple of things here. First of all, you are, you're brilliant at what you do, right? You're a genomics guy, you're a population genetics guy, all this stuff. These are things, and then on top of that, you're a brown guy from a Muslim background, right?
Yeah,
so they're like, hey, look, I mean, so isn't there an opportunity for a lot of these people to go, hey, look, I got this poster where there's a brown guy, the Muslim background, he's coming, he's saying all the shit that, he's backing it all up with facts, and this is what I'm...
Well, actually...
So people can exploit you, can't they?
They can. But that's how it always is. I can only speak for myself. I'm very clear. This is what my friends always say. They're always like, Razib, you're always very clear. What people do with what you say can be quite different, right?
Right.
But I mean, the facts are there. The data analysis is there. Just because. So sometimes I will tweet something out that's edgy. I don't tweet that much anymore for various reasons. Everyone knows what Twitter's like. But anyways, I'll tweet something out and it'll like go viral somehow, and someone will tweet at me, I wonder how you feel that this objectionable person you've never heard about liked your tweet. And I'm like, who is even thinking in this way?
No, I know.
I don't really care. So it's like, and I was talking to so I'm going to name drop, Skip Gates. We're friendly. I consult for a show. I hope I'm not going to get fired because I mentioned this, but anyway.
So, can you explain who that is?
Henry Louis Gates Jr. He had the Beer Summit.
Yeah.
So he runs a show about genetic genealogy.
So let me explain this just for the people who don't know. Henry Louis Gates was and correct me if I'm wrong, he was a professor that during Obama's time there was a cop that went into his house and arrested him for being in his own house. So it was so Obama called both of them to have a beer with him so he could talk about race issues. Yeah.
So
he's a black professor.
He's a doyen of African American studies and stuff like that. So I mean, he's a big deal. But I was like, I asked him, and I did a 10 questions on my blog with him actually. But I asked him, I was like, we both read classics of people that, I mean, to be frank, would think we're inferior. But that's whatever. That's just how it is. I'm not going to ideologically police Immanuel Kant. You
Yeah.
know, I mean,
Huh.
look at what he wrote about people that look like us.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Voltaire also said quite racist things,
No,
actually.
Voltaire was like a notorious
Yeah.
anti-Semite too. He
So I
was,
mean, this sort of like policing, like it's very Salafi, where it's
it
like
is.
there's
Yeah.
only it's a very Salafi or a Calvinist mind, like certain types of Puritans, like there's the banned books list. So it's coming back on the left. Like I mean, one reason I identify as a conservative is I like to think for myself. There's
Hmm.
a lot less policing on the right. On the left, there's a lot more policing today. I don't know, maybe because the left is culturally powerful and power corrupts. I don't know, but so I think when people say like, "Oh, people are using you for this and using you for that," I mean, the facts are the facts. How people are going to use it, like, do you disagree with the facts or do you disagree with the interpretation of the facts?
Hmm.
Right. So, I mean, that's basically where I stand. So people like to say, for example, I think we're both on the same page on this, so but maybe not.
Hmm.
Like people say like a lot of geneticists say race is not biologically real. My objection to that term or that phrase is that people who are not geneticists take the wrong conclusion from it. And so if you say something and they consistently take the wrong conclusion, you need to say it differently or
Hmm.
explain what you mean, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's like population structure is real. It's not arbitrary. It's trivial to classify and analyze. But
Yeah, yeah.
these are
I,
conclusions that people get confused by when you say it's not biologically real.
yeah, it's yeah, but you know what? I think that people should explain instead of getting upset. They're like, well, you just don't understand or whatever. They need to. uh, that's the right thing. Like they really do need to explain things better. And I don't know who it was that said it, or maybe it's just one of these anonymous things, but the idea that if you can't, I think may have been Richard Feynman, that if you can't explain what your knowledge in simple terms to somebody so they can understand it, right, then you have to question what you know. You
Yeah.
should be able to explain it.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. And I like biological race is. I mean, people say it's real. I just tell them to go to Wikipedia and look up ecotype. You see that, like people who are species. It happens in all the species. You when you migrate to different parts of the world, then that region, that regional geography, that has an effect on you and on how you evolve, and that's how members of the same species can have different characteristics. And this is like being a physician does other things, especially pathologists. Like I know that we have different reference ranges when we're looking at kidney function tests for blacks and whites. Like when you're looking at glomerular filtration rate, the EGFR, it's different. There's a different range for a black person, different range for a white person, reference ranges. So, that's just one example. Like there are many different things, and that does not mean that one is better, one is worse, or one is superior, one is inferior. It doesn't mean any of that. All it means is that there are differences, and this is
Mm,
actually a biological reality. A lot of things are biological realities. I mean,
mm,
think about like with sexuality and reproduction and how they're sort of inextricably linked in males, where every time you ejaculate, you're going to have an orgasm. But with with females, I don't know if I'm supposed to say females or women or I
Don't even
don't
go there.
know.
Don't even go
Yeah,
there.
yeah, no, I'm not going to go on there. But generally, with karyotypic females with larger size gametes, okay,
Yeah.
let's go with that. There you go, the gametes.
Yeah.
That's the one thing. You um, you can have sexuality in terms of orgasms. You can have like 7 in a session, but you're only going to have that one egg every month, right? So and that has to have an effect. If I don't give my kid a hug and then years later that affects their relationship, that can have such a massive impact. How could something this huge, how could just the basics of reproductive endocrinology not have an effect on our behavior and the way that
Hmm.
we pursue life,
Hmm.
relationships, sexuality, whatever it is? So there is a denial of reality, and that's why I think one of your articles, and another one of your articles I'll talk about, I think so. This one was in the National Review, where you talked about how you talked about evolution deniers, how people on the left who are denying these things are actually, in a way, that's a new kind
Hmm.
of evolution
Sure.
denial.
Sure.
And how conservatives, and you made the argument that conservatives should actually embrace evolution. because it's an acknowledgement of the truth. It actually gives, and I identify as a left liberal, right? So I don't think of myself as a conservative at all. But on this, I think I'm completely aligned with you that this is actually a rejoinder to the sort of super leftists who say that whatever's natural, karyotypes, reproductive endocrinology, all of these things, they just don't exist. They're not real. Everything is a social construct.
Yeah.
Right. So when you embrace evolution, and again, correct me if I'm wrong or misrepresenting you in any way, but if you embrace evolution, that is a rejoinder to that kind of sort of political, just washing everything politically, all of the reality, the scientific reality with politics.
Yeah. So let me go really quickly into the backstory of like how that happened. So since I am literally the only Republican biologist, there are others, but if you Google Republican biologist or people know, like conservatives know that I am of their tribe, kind of. Basically, it's a fact that most scientists, they hate conservatives, they hate Republicans, and Republicans also, they know this, and so they're very wary. They're not wary with me because they know that I'm not going to denounce them because I'm, and so I do get contacts from them.
I gotta say, you're one of the very few Republican scientists that I really like. And so that's a huge compliment to you, even though I don't know if that's going to be offensive because...
your feelings are your feelings. I'm not offended by your feelings, bro.
Feelings. You're telling me those are my feelings, huh?
Yeah, that's how you feel. Yeah. But so what happened was there was an article in the Federalist that was kind of anti-evolution, and I have a lot of contacts in right-wing think tank world and conservative think tanks, and very few people are creationists or against evolution, but people just kind of keep it on the down low because they don't want to offend the evangelical allies, whatever. And I was just like, okay, like this is, I'm gonna. Part of it was I was actually inspired by Extremely Offline, a podcast that I'm also a patron of, by Zaid Jalani and Leighton Woodhouse, and they bring together people with opposite views, and I really like what they're trying to do. So I was like, I'm gonna try to like submit to the Federalist a piece that supports evolution. To make a long story short, like I tried for 3 weeks, it just wasn't gonna happen. I'm going to like say a lower level editor basically was going to spike it no matter what. I know this now in hindsight. Ben Domenech, I'm friendly with. Like, he wouldn't have had a problem with it. But anyway, so there's some politics that happen there. So I was like,
that's why you're the only Republican scientist I like. This is a Federalist, and you can... I'm just going to make my points here, too. I'm going to make my feelings known as well. So, go ahead.
No, but so I was like, okay, I have this piece. So I know people at National Review. I just email them. And I'm going to have another piece in National Review in like the print edition, by the way, at the end of March on personal genomics. But anyway, cool. So I was like, oh, can I just like submit this to you guys? And they were like, oh yeah. And so I put that out there. And the intent of the piece was to show to conservatives and to show to the world, actually, there's a lot of us that accept evolution. It's just we don't really talk about it too much because, we don't want to like offend our allies. A little bit of political correctnthink on the right, Right, yeah. And there was a new anti-evolution book that came out, William Dembski and I think the Darwin's Black Box, Behe, and the other guy. Anyway, they were. I do not believe it was a good book, obviously, because it's against evolution. It didn't make any sense. I saw a positive review. I think I can say this. This wasn't anyone who's an editor at National Review now. They actually showed me the positive review. They were like, should we publish this? And I said no, and this is why. And I gave them long annotations. And so they didn't. That positive review went somewhere else, more obscure. But in any case, so I wanted to do that because I just wanted to like show the world and also speak for those of us who do accept evolution and live in the 21st century. Yeah. And also I wanted to make the case that it was compatible with like conservative thought. And just kind of like, the organic understanding of social structures. They're not arbitrary. They're not all socially constructed. Now, the blowback was mostly positive, but then some people on the radical left who are social constructionists they accused me of being like all sorts of, the usual transphobe, which like, okay, I didn't really... I don't know. Like people draw connections to transphobia to everythking, so I actually didn't know.
Everything's transphobic. Like,
that was that. But one thing I will tell your listeners or viewers is what really pisses me off is like, and then people started accusing me be a Dinesh D'Souza of population genetics, and I was like, this is the thing with liberals. You guys are against racism, but whenever you're pissed
That
at me,
yeah, that's
the only
racist.
thing I have in common with Dinesh D'Souza is this. Like, I have
Yeah.
nothing else in common. Well, I mean, I guess we're both conservative, but we're very different. And so I was just like, okay,
So
like,
you wrote an article praising evolution and making a strong case for evolution, in support of evolution, saying that conservatives should actually,
yeah.
embrace this because this is the truth and it's real and this is evolution, which is the exact opposite of anything Dinesh D'Souza would probably say.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like kind of pissed because I was like, this is what always happens where it's like, oh, all these like SJWs that are against racism, but like they like, and like a lot of conservative non-whites will tell you, like they go there.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
you're white adjacent now. Like
White adjacent.
Do anything.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, it was like that was the only thing that like really pissed me off. The rest of the denunciation, I got to see like who I feel like were my friends within the population genetics community. I'll give you an example. Someone who, I'm friends with still, but like I got to get a sense of them. So like everyone who was a mutual follower with this person was like, you need to unfollow Razib because he's evil. I mean, this is like TLDR, but one of my friends who I've actually done a lot of solids for, including getting jobs for, saw it, got stressed out, and preemptively denounced me without reading the article, and then sent me a text to apologize. They were just scared. But I told my friend, I was like, okay, like I see what the...
So is this like peer pressure? They just decided to shit on you because of peer pressure?
Yeah, it was like they were doing Maoist struggle session stuff. And so I told my friend, I was like, okay, like I know what the content of your character is. Like some random person you don't know denounces someone who like has actually been a real life friend, and then you just do the denunciation before you even read because you got scared. And then he like apologized. Anyway, he was scared. It's fine. I understand. But there are other people who actually did defend me. And I was like, whoa, like these people, like there are people with courage out there because they had to like go against like all these accusations, and they were just like, we don't like agree with everything Razib says, which like, of course, why would you? But you have to say that. But we think that this is ridiculous. There are other people who privately sent me messages. They're like, yeah, I read it and I didn't see anything offensive. And then I guess I could see their interpretation, but you have to interpret, Anyway, so it was just interesting. But I mean, when I say like I'm a conservative, I have like a very simple heuristic on this. It's like, who is against me and who is for me? Like I am with who is for me.
Yeah.
And I am against who is against me. So like I have a lot of views that are you would call socially liberal, but ultimately that doesn't really matter, does it? Because like, are you going to be in the camps or are you going to send people to the camps? Like if it gets to that stage, you have to like think about like who has your back, because this is the world we live in. Like you can be like an isolated, like just rationalizing machine, which I'm probably a little too much of that, but
I think it's a little bit more than just who's with me and who's against me, because you can have very I know this from the stuff that I do, so we're again being part of the left and the liberal circles, that there's a lot of times I'm called a sellout and everything too. Armin even more so. It was since I started hanging out with Armin, he gets all of that, and I'm sort of back. But it still happens. But for me, it's not as simple as who's with me and who's against me, who has my back, because often the people who do have my back are some of those opportunists, right? Who will come, that they'll sort of use what I have to say to further whatever they want to do, and a lot of the bigotry and everything. So it's not as simple, but I guess. But I would say that you have to. I would probably look at it, and I've seen it on both sides. I've seen it with liberals and conservatives both. There are a few that will come out and say openly, without fear, what may be unpopular for their own fellow people. And those are the people I respect the most, because here's the thing, like you were mentioning earlier, there's a lot of conservatives who embrace evolution, they're against creationism, but they don't really talk about it out loud, like in the think tanks, because of the evangelicals and everything like that. To me, that's very similar to the liberals who stay quiet when they're actually feeling something. So I think it happens on both sides.
Yeah, it does. Right? There's definitely both sides to it. One thing I would say is like I distinguish the liberals and the left. So my argument to my liberal friends is always like, you should just join us on the right, and we can fight after we defeat the left. because
Yeah.
if the left is gone, I might actually be on the left liberal side.
Yeah, but there's a left that's online on Twitter, and
Yes,
online on Twitter, the left, right, everything is just
yes,
ape
yeah.
shit, stupid.
I
But
totally
then
think you're right,
there's, yeah,
but I've seen things change in academia, and I've seen the academic language start percolating
that's
to
right.
Democratic
Yeah.
candidates. So I do think that what happens online and in the seminars has a big effect on the left, partly because academia is influential on the left in the way it isn't on the right.
Yeah, you're
So if
right.
I say I'm socially liberal, which I probably would say the vast majority of, I would just say that, but I'm not really sure if I am anymore because I don't know what that even means because it just changes so fast. And it's like, I like to quote the, saying like the Ummah shall not agree upon error. I see a lot of social justice warriors, they just agree that this is the progressive view on this and this is the progressive view on that. But like they actually are in conflict, but they've just agreed that,
Yeah,
so like for example, like you can't be in the United States, you can't be transracial.
right.
But why?
Well, I mean, that's obviously, it's like the races. So on one hand, this is the problem with, okay, so the trans thing is a little tough. Okay,
Yeah.
actually, it's quite tough. So there's, for me, it's a matter of, when they say what is socially liberal, like you said, there has to be some sort of rooting in reality. Like, for instance, with same-sex marriage, right? Same-sex marriage has never felt like an issue for me because, first of all, just from a liberty point of view, people should be able to do whatever the hell they want to do. And, homosexuality is something that you see
Sure.
in hundreds of species of
Sure.
other animals. And,
Yeah.
it's like, it's fine. But when you're talking about trans, on one hand, there's this idea that gender is not a real thing and it's a construct. On the other hand, when you are transitioning from a male gender to a female gender, like Caitlyn Jenner, what do? You put on makeup, you grow your
Yeah.
hair, you
Yeah.
start wearing dresses. You're doing this. It's gender
Yep.
essentialist
Yeah.
in
It
a
doesn't.
way.
Yeah. A lot of
Like
my.
it is.
Yeah.
Like you
One
wouldn't
of,
need cis and trans if there
yeah.
was no biological sex. Like
Yeah. It
there's no such
doesn't.
thing as biological sex. If there's no such thing as biological sex, why are you
Yeah.
using terms like cis and trans? The
Yeah. I feel.
words cis and trans actually acknowledge the very
Yeah.
idea that biological sex is real.
There's something in this discussion where it's like, okay, like it's kind of like, can God create a rock that he can't lift up? There's some like logical
Yeah.
conundrums going on where it's like there's a circularity and like, okay, like what starts where and how did this happen? With the gays thing, it was relatively straightforward for me because I'm just like, I like women. There are other guys that like guys and girls that like girls. Okay, it's just kind of like a modification on something I already understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like, okay, like you just change the parameter. So it's like, let's think like formally you have a model and you just change the parameter from like positive to negative or something in, some of the variables. But with some of these other new radical things like of social constructionism, or like, what about like disability rights? I mean, we all want people with disabilities to have dignity,
Yeah.
but like, what does that mean? So, we talked earlier about trisomy. There are disability rights activists that are extremely angry about the termination in utero.
Yeah.
Because that is discriminatory. It is.
It is.
It is. It's like there are all these sorts of groups, and I do think.
But and that's not even a liberal conservative thing. This is, I mean, conservatives are completely against it for other reasons
for different
too. I mean,
reasons.
just
Yeah, a
because
lot of conservative pro-life.
and sort of similar reasons in a way, that just because, I mean, this is what God gave you. God gave you this kid who's got Down syndrome. Why are you getting rid of him? So there's a pro-life, and for me, it's all about that. It's about facts. It's about evidence, and it is hard to make these decisions. Like I've always said that I find the abortion issue, even though I'm pretty solidly pro-choice, I get the other side. Like, I understand that if you're looking at it from a libertarian perspective, if you're looking at a fetus as a human being, then yes, you would see that as murder. And it's not about the woman's choice because it's a woman, and then there's this other individual inside, and they have. So I get all of that. That's much easier for me to understand, even if I don't agree with it completely, than say something like an opposition to same-sex marriage, which I just think is completely nonsensical, right? But so again, I feel like there has to be some sort of rooting in something that in some sort of scientific reality. There has to be, and I'm 100%. I think that people should be able to identify as whatever gender they want. All this stuff doesn't bother me. The pronouns thing, I don't care about pronouns. It's like a really really big deal. Someone wants me to call them they, I'll call them they. You know, this happened actually with the word you and thou. You know how thou was for individuals and you was for collective group, right? You and ye, and eventually you became for the collective, like they, right? And a lot of sort of religious authorities got very upset at that because they thought this was against God's language, and eventually nobody cared. It happened. So that kind of thing doesn't bother me. The pronouns issue, or people wanting to identify with 72 genders. Who cares? The only problem is that when there's this denial of biological reality. And when you're having any kind of conversation about biological sex, for instance, and all of the implications associated with it, even in a completely different context, and they jump on you, that's something you have to fight back against, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird though because there is a complication to it. It is complicated. Like you can complicate it. So like one of the some biologists were saying, well, like gender and sex is more complicated than you're saying, and I'm just like, yeah, it is more complicated, but like I mean I was educated in the life sciences, and why wasn't it so complicated 10 years ago? It's like how you emphasize certain things. I mean, there's orthogonal. There's like somewhat different issues related to like human social complexity and cooperation, where again you can complicate it too. But I mean, there's like this course like baseline understanding that we're a social organism, like how that happens, how selfishness operates with unselfishness. There's a lot of details to be worked in, and I feel like there's a bit of sophistry in some of the pushback about like, oh well, actually. It's not so straightforward that there are predominantly two sexes or two genders or whatever. And I'm like, okay, like I think it is pretty straightforward, but this is, I mean, if this is something you had to discover in the last 5 years, I'm not really sure that you're being motivated by just the evidence. That's my opinion, And so, that's something that I've encountered, I've seen in academia, and I'm really turned off by the way academics have been behaving recently.
That is, I think, the most worrisome thing about this is the infiltration into academia, because a lot of these issues they've, when I was looking at Douglas Murray's book and I was reading, parts of it. I admittedly I haven't read the whole thing, but there's to me a lot of these culture wars seem like the stuff that's happened forever between generations. It's like a generation gap. Or, my dad didn't like it when I grew my hair, or they were like, oh, what's wrong with black people and white people getting married? Yeah, it's just your general generational things with the older people, like, oh, look at the kids of today, what they're doing, and the kids are like, no, fuck you, we're gonna be, this is the right way to be, and you guys are all outdated and okay, boomer, and so I feel that there's that, but the infiltration, when it infiltrates into academia, and then these, and they can actually tell professors what to do, and they can sort of terrorize them, really, like. Yeah, scare them into silence. Where people are leaving. They're leaving academia.
Yeah, they are, and I can tell you a lot of stories of like the compromises people make, and motivated minorities can affect a lot of change because a lot of people are busy. They're doing research. They're writing grants. They don't have time to get into food fights constantly, and so people are looking the other way, not engaging on certain issues, not putting up certain fights. I feel like academia has gotten, like 10 years ago, my friend Heather McDonald emailed me and was just like, she's wondering about academia. And I said, well, scientists are liberal, but science is not liberal. Yeah. Science doesn't have an ideology. I wouldn't tell her that now because 10 years ago, academics like scientists that I know were like, well, there's the reason there's no conservatives in science is because either conservatives are stupid or they're just not interested. And I'm like, I kind of disagreed, but that's not totally irrational. There's self-selection going on. So okay, that's fine. Today in 2020, there are academics now who are saying like it is our choice and our right to discriminate politically because we don't feel comfortable with people with certain views. Like it's like the subtext went to the text. Like they just like they're not even pretending anymore, So it's like that's how far it's gone. And I know people who are like supporters of Pete Buttigieg. in academia who would never say it on Twitter because they don't want to be attacked as reactionaries.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that is crazy. And privately, a lot of people are very different than what they project on social media, or even to like their colleagues that are just acquaintances and not friends.
It's supporters of Pete Buttigieg, so that is taboo, right? Is what you're saying?
Yes, because he's a neoliberal shill reaction. I don't know. I mean, whatever.
It's amazing because he's one of the most progressive candidates to run in history.
Yeah,
in history, like in it. But he is, and he's gay and he's married and all that. But yeah, he's a Christian,
kind of the
and
problem. That's kind
and
of
the races. They call him racist. Yeah,
he's very bourgeois. He's a very bourgeois gay guy.
I saw Masha Gessen's article on him where she said, and this was astounding. Like, he's not, he's a straight politician in a gay man's body. Yeah. But I was thinking that's what they used to say about Obama, that he's not black enough, and now Pete Buttigieg is not gay enough. I mean, there's
this is interesting because the same people that are objecting to stereotypes get annoyed when people break out of their stereotypes. Isn't that the irony? That's what I thought when I read that. I'm like, dude, he has sex with men. What more do you want?
He kisses his husband on stage. Like, what? How gay do you want him to be? And this is something I was thinking, like, and there's a lot of people, on the right, people kind of downplay all of this identity stuff. And I think that at times it's massive. It's huge for like Iowa and New Hampshire, for the guy to have the delegate lead to be a gay married man in the Democratic Party, in a major party in the U.S. That is something to celebrate. That's not just identity politics. I mean, these are like the word, I don't want to say it because I know YouTube will ban us, but, the FAGGOT word, like this actually meant, and this is, again, I know this is a pathologist, is that there is a certain kind of leukemia where you have these FAGGOT cells, because those are, what the word means is cords of wood. So they have these things called Auer rods, like AUER rods, that are in there, and they're just bundles of wood. And what they used to do through history is they used to throw these bundles of wood in the fire to make the fire grow. And they used to throw in gay people into the fire and burn them alive along with those bundles of wood. That is where the word came from.
Yeah.
Okay. And that is the kind of history that these people have had. And now he's the one of the major he's the delegate lead, right, for the first two states. This is something that liberals should be celebrating instead of saying he's not gay enough. I mean, that's insane. It drives me insane.
One of the things with Trump is, like, you notice, like, they're not gonna like roll back like gay marriage or anything. I mean, he said he would vote for a gay candidate.
Yeah, no Republican would. Yeah. I don't think any Republican, even Mike Pence, if he got in there, he's not going to touch it because it's just not.
Our culture has totally changed. It's totally changed. But I mean, I think it's changed partly because Buttigieg, again, he is conforming to a very understandable, relatable standard. He doesn't want to radically he doesn't want to change my family.
Yeah.
He has his own family, right? So I mean, that's what's going on there. But I think that offends certain people because certain people want. I mean, there's this stupid Vice article about how, like, this woman wants to abolish the family, blah blah blah. It's like this has been
almost every Vice article these days that I see is just I don't know what happened to Vice. Vice used to be fucking amazing.
I think Vice should be switched from Vice to Virtue Signal, but
yeah, I know, it's like Vice and Virtue. It's gone. So hey, listen, before you go, and I know we're kind of over, but I could talk to you for a very, very long time. I'm not going to do that though. I want to ask you just about two more things. One is just in terms of in the Ancestor's Tale, right, the updated edition by Richard Dawkins, he talked about how virtually everybody in Europe probably has some level of descendancy from Muhammad because of the Moorish invasion of southern Europe. How
genealogically,
yeah.
Genealogically, that's different than genetics.
So what does that mean?
So basically, if you go back 200 years, you have an X number of ancestors, assuming that you're outbred, that you don't have like cousin marriage and stuff like that, which, with you might be a little different. No,
of course. Yeah, I know.
Pakistan,
guys.
But
that's why I look like this.
Yeah,
unfortunately. That's where the.
But so basically, there's a 50% chance that you have any segment of DNA from any given individual that far back, and the further far back you go, you have all these ancestors, but the vast majority of them are not contributing DNA down to you. And so, yes, it is true that you can draw a line of genealogy almost certainly from any European back to Muhammad through that princess from one of the Moorish families who married into, I think it was like an Aragonese royalty.
Yeah,
and
it was
then
there was Isabella who and what was I can't forget her original Muslim name, but she was a direct descendant of Muhammad.
Yeah.
And she got married to, I think, King George. I can't remember the
Yeah,
exact
yeah,
same thing.
no, Sancho
But there's
or
a family tree, and Queen Elizabeth actually is a legit descendant of Muhammad.
Yes.
She actually is.
Yeah.
So
and so I mean, like, you can draw these genealogies, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's any distinctive genetic material. Like, there is in some people, but so that's the issue. Like, everyone's genealogically related, but that doesn't mean we share segments of DNA. The segments of DNA you have depend like how many times this particular individual shows up in your genealogy.
Right, but in the old school, like ways before the genetic thing was even an issue, nobody really cared about genetic material. They cared about family trees,
but I mean,
so they cared about genealogy.
That is certainly correct. That is certainly
correct. So there's this thing for a lot of there's a subgroup of Muslims, and especially Shia Muslims, called Sayyids, and they call themselves Sayyids. You get that title because you are apparently a descendant of Muhammad. Yeah, but Muhammad actually got his business into so many different areas that almost like many of us are actual descendants of Muhammad. And Richard Dawkins himself said that he's like, I'm most likely a descendant of Muhammad, which is just a really funny thing. Like it'd make a great tweet. Well, so he actually acknowledges it.
One thing I would say about the Sayyids is the royal families that in the Arab world that claim Sayyid ancestry, they tend to be haplogroup J2, which is they tend to be a subhaplogroup that's the cousin haplogroup or haplotype to the Cohens. Cohen
J1.
No, J1 is mostly Arabs. I think it's J2.
Arabs, okay.
I think it's J2 though. It's J2 for Muhammad. So South Asians Sayyids I've looked at, they tend not to be J2. They tend to be like R1A. So my hypothesis, my explanation is most South Asian Sayyids are actually descended from upper caste Hindus who maintain their status. They just claimed that they were Sayyids. They were descended from Muhammad, even though they were descended from some Brahmin or Khatri or something.
Razib, wait till the science denialism starts here.
Oh no, I already get emails. I've caused controversies apparently in message boards of Sayyids.
Yeah.
Of Pakistani Sayyids. Because like someone was like, this is what my data says. And I'm like, oh yeah, you guys are Khatris.
I got to get on those message boards because I am actually a Sayyid as well. I have that time. I've got the name from birth. And we have a family, apparently a family, they call it a shajra. It's a family tree, genealogy tree that goes all the way back to Muhammad. I mean, I've seen it.
You know what an Arab calls a South Asian Sayyid?
What?
A kufar. No.
Well, of course they do, don't they?
I'm just paraphrasing Malcolm X. Like, what does a white guy call a black guy with a PhD?
Yeah. So I got to ask you something now that we've sort of segued into it better than I did. So my haplogroup, my paternal haplogroup is JP. Hold on, is it? I gotta double check it now. JP458 or something like that. No, JP58. JP58, which is apparently a really rare haplogroup. Do you know any? I don't think you. I don't know if you know about anything about it offhand.
I'm looking up really quickly. It looks like it's a Semitic. So it's a Semitic haplogroup, actually. And
I know. So there's a lot of people from Qatar, a lot of people from Yemen, a lot of Jews, including some Ashkenazi, some of the Kohanim. Well, a lot of the non-Kohanim.
Yeah.
Oh no, the Kohanim, but 46% of the Kohanim. Cohens.
So I guess like maybe you actually do have a paternal lineage that goes to West Asia, like into the Arab world. I mean, just because mostly South Asian J's are J2s.
Yeah.
And those are indigenous, and they're related to like an Iranian expansion, like ancient Iranian expansion. And so I guess like you might be the real deal.
Oh my God, I might be a real fucking Sayyid. Sorry, Armin's gonna kill me as this one.
Yeah, well, I'll do a follow up with you. Yeah, I think that's very rare. That's a very rare haplogroup in South Asians in particular.
Yeah, it is.
So you might, and I've looked at Pakistanis where it looks like some of them have a little bit of West Asia, like Arab type admixture. So I mean, it's there. It's just at low level. It's one of those things where it's like a lot of South Asian Muslims. They're like, oh well, my great grandfather was a Persian. And I'm like, okay, but what about every single other one of your ancestors? Well, I don't know. That's what's going on. I'm like, okay, let's count too, bro.
It's so weird. we can't imagine. People have a really hard time imagining the sort of exponential nature of how this happens and how these genealogies come to be. But yeah, we can talk about this more offline.
Yeah,
I'll write to you about it. But I'm very interested because the reason I'm telling you is because this caused a lot of controversy in my extended family, who really believe we're Sayyids, we're descended from Muhammad, this and that. And initially, this was JP58. Now it's called JP58. Initially, it was called J1C3 or something, and there was. This is about 5-6 years ago, and it wasn't as well delineated. And at that time, there was a saying that you've got from what's now Eastern Turkey, migrated down to Israel, and you've got Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry, and this and that. So when that happened, that caused a lot of controversy in my extended family, and it was so much fun to troll them with that side of it, even though the ancestry also came from other places.
You are right. You are legit. Hashemites are JP58.
Hashemites are JP58?
The Hashemite royal family, yeah.
Now, can you say that so I can take a clip of this and put it on Twitter as a way for people to watch this?
Yeah, okay, you're legit, you're Karish in the house. You are,
I
think you are, yeah, because the Hashemite royal, they do with the Hashemites and the Moroccan royal family, they are J1P58 mutation. That is assumed to be the legit descent of Muhammad through the Quraysh. So you are I'm
a descendant of Muhammad.
Yeah, do I have to kiss your feet or something? I don't know.
No, you don't have to do anything. It doesn't matter. It's okay. I have to make sure I just marry my cousins from now on.
Yeah,
keep it in the family. That's all.
Oh, that's pretty awesome though. You're a descendant of Muhammad, or someone that claimed to be Muhammad. Wow, that's interesting. Okay,
I just saw it. It was JP58, and it was this is a very rare thing among South Asians, and on 23andMe. And I was like, okay, I got to find out more about this. But there wasn't that much known about it. A lot of this stuff has been uncovered recently.
So do you get a special insurance rate for your car now and all these things?
Well, now I am, aren't I? I think I need to move back to Saudi Arabia. That's what I fucking need to do.
All right, bro.
I've been here for too long anyway. Yeah. Hey, listen, man, thanks for talking to me. We covered so much stuff. It's great. And I do want to have you back on when Armin is here.
Yeah, the Ayatollah, I hope he's doing well physically. Iranians are not doing well right now.
Oh, physically? You think?
Ayatollahs.
He's Armin is afflicted with the coronavirus. That's what he's got. He's got the coronavirus right now. Yeah, that's what's happening. Right. Yeah, you're right. They're not doing very well. That was comical, wasn't it? The deputy health minister. He's out there. He's like, "Oh, we don't have any coronavirus problems," yeah. and he's wiping his nose and sneezing and shit. And the next day, he's like, "I got coronavirus." It's when they denied that. It's when they denied there was no homosexuality in Iran.
Yeah,
Ahmadinejad used to say that.
Yeah.
Oh man, that place is funny. It's
that's the way someone like Armin could come to be. Only a place as crazy as Iran could produce, those Persians. At least he doesn't wear the gold chains, on the podcast.
I love doing episodes without Armin. This is great. I'm going to make a total habit of this, everybody who's listening. Yeah, if you like this, if you enjoyed this episode, let me know. We have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/SJME. You can go there. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month.
I'm a patron.
Just set your limits. And Razib is a patron. Razib, thank you very much.
I'm a patron.
If you can't financially contribute, share it on your social media feeds. Tell people about it. Go on the podcast app, the Apple Podcasts, and leave us a review. Whatever you can do to get the word out. And Razib, man, thank you very much for doing this. And this is great.
It was great talking. I'll talk to you some other time.
Yeah. We're gonna have you back on when Armin's on too. He's gonna be jealous.
All right. Take it easy, bro.
All right.
The secular jihadists have been made possible thanks to the Illuminati and the covert support of Israel and the CIA. That's what we have been told, but we haven't received our checks yet. If you like what we do, please support us. Share the podcast with your friends. Write and tweet us with topic and guest suggestions. Or head over to secularjihadist.com and give $1 or more for exclusive access to live video. Have your questions read and answered on the air, and more. Till next time, may the flying spaghetti monster be with you.